Hi everybody, welcome back to Beyond the Label podcast. So today I'm here with Tang. He is the co-founder and creative director of the Anthology, and we'll get to know all about that. So hi Buzz.
Hey everyone. Hi Leanne. Thanks for having me here.
I'm so excited for this because we've actually been trying to schedule this interview for like a couple of months.
Oh, sorry. It's definitely my fault. I didn't mean to, but yeah. Well, we got here, so all is good.
I mean, I know that you have like a really busy traveling schedule with your work and everything. So why don't you just start by telling us what your work is about?
Well, my work supposedly doesn't involve as much travel, to be honest. But it just happened so this year has been like a very interesting year. So, I've been traveling around, but I'm a classic menswear designer. What our company does is basically we're specializing in bespoke tailoring. We measure people up, make them garments that has like a very specific point of view, apart from like, the very old school world of tailoring where people make you a suit that, they would mimic from, for example, like you bring in a sheet of Tom Ford or like a Laura Piana suit and you ask them to copy it. And then most old school tailors will tell you like, we're happy to do it, yada, yada, yada. I think at the Anthology, we have a very particular mindset. We have a very particular view in terms of like how we perceive a suit or like, how we perceive tailoring or how tailoring can be worn in the modern world as well. So I think essentially what we're offering is a new perspective to it.
So of course, I'm gonna get into all about like why you started this, and I actually did a little bit of stalking before this. So I went to your Facebook, and apparently your Facebook is not completely private. So I just wanted to know that first.
Oh, interesting.
And I saw you posting photos
from
like 10 years ago, and you were like styling. Is this like bringing up memories?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, we're going down a memory lane right now.
Yeah. So you've been like in like fashion for like so long.
Well, let's just call it progression, shall we? I think I've always been very into art and fashion. I think clothing specifically. So I think growing up, I've always been exposed to like interesting clothing. I've always loved fashion. And I think especially when I was like in high school, I think there was a time I was very into like, certain ways of dressing as well. But it only got to a point where, I think 2012 to 2015, there was a time when, minimalism was everything.
Yeah.
Like you have fashion brands, COS, you have Acne Studios, you have all these like interesting, little brands, be it like high luxury or like, like middle tier popping up. And there was a time I really wanted to kind of dress in that sort of way as well, but every time when I actually buy any of those like skinny jeans, when I actually buy those t-shirts, I'm not muscular enough. I'm not like, maybe because maybe the reason why I'm actually running this is to address my own insecurity perhaps, but I think when I looked in the mirror with one of those old clothing, all I thought about was, I feel like, there's something missing. I just felt like, my physique wasn't the right fit for it. You look at models who are like 6 feet tall, obviously like they can wear whatever they want to wear. But, for someone who's actually as petite as I am, dressing in good clothing is not as easy as you would think. I think it got to a point where I was like, okay, well, maybe I have to look into custom clothing because it feels like I have very specific body proportions, which I think, in a custom world, it can potentially create a facade or, make things better visually. So it got me into tailoring, and that's how I really started.
And so, since you were interested in this from such a young age, how does it come about though? Like, I know like, for girls,
Right.
we watch movies, we read magazines, we look up to these like models and celebrities, and that's how a lot of us like got interested into like beauty and fashion. So what was it like for you?
Okay, that's a very interesting question that I was actually never asked about. I would say it's relatively similar, I would say. Yeah. I think I had a lot of experiences that were actually a little closer to a girl rather than a guy, to be honest. I loved fashion magazines when I was a kid. From a slightly more masculine point of view, I probably would go for like, because there were very limited options back in Hong Kong, which is where I grew up. So there was Monocle, which is like a little more manly, but not quite. And obviously there's Esquire, which is like not my cup of tea. But I would say I was actually more drawn to like Vogue, a little bit of Cosmopolitan because it was a thing in Hong Kong at that time. Probably Elle as well. That's more or less it. So I think I got the same inspiration from what a typical like fashion aware like female would be at that time. But I think obviously it has kind of transcended beyond because I was kind of like more exposed to the classical world, and I moved to London afterwards as well. So I got to see a little more. Yeah. So it's a bit different in terms of style.
Did you only start, like, when did you start designing things actually? Was it from, like, you had the idea of starting this company, or were you just doing it, like, as a passion just from, like, a long time ago?
Oh, okay. Well, I've always loved design, and In fact, I actually went into design school as well. I studied footwear design, and it was specifically for women's high heels, actually. So it was entirely different to the world that I'm exposed to today. I love tailoring because I dress in tailoring all the time. I was dressing tailoring when I was a kid as well. The middle period, I went for a little bit of high fashion and other things, but I think I still love tailoring a lot. And I think I've always kind of like wanted to make a mark in this industry, but I didn't know how to. And I was doing footwear design, and I thought I would actually be like a footwear designer afterwards. But I think it's always like the right time, right place, right? Like I went to school in London, I didn't love it, and I was running up a place called Savile Row, which is like a very famous street for like bespoke tailoring. I wouldn't say day and night, but I would say like, you know, if you really have to like break it down 5 days a week, I probably spend like a good 3 days there per week.
Wow.
Yeah, just to like, you know, see things, meet people, you know, always doing a little bit of window shopping, learning about things. And I think there was a point, someone who probably worked on like Savile Row, you know, he saw me, and then he saw me like going up and down all the time. And I think it was almost like bugging him. So I think he just came up to me. He was like, oh, you know, what are you doing? I see you all the time here. I started having a conversation with him and realizing he was actually one of the fabric traders on Savile Row, which is to an extent a very exclusive trade, because we all know how Savile Row is, or, you know, we know how these industries work. You know, it's quite a close-knit society. They're not particularly welcoming. So I actually find it quite intriguing that, you know, someone would actually approach a young Asian boy, you know, asking them, you know, are they interested in actually like, you know, joining or giving them a hand. So I took the mantle, you know, I took the opportunity to like, you know, just give it a go. Why not, right? So I think that kind of helped build up a little bit of a profile. Yeah, so that's how I started, really. And I guess it's the right time, right place afterwards. I got to meet my business partner in Hong Kong. I think I've tried a little bit of like Italian tailoring. British tailoring is something that's a separate conversation. We can talk about that later. It might be a little bit too intricate, but I've tried a little bit from here and there, and I went back to Hong Kong hoping that I could actually find something quite similar. But because Hong Kong was a British colony, so I think the typical custom tailoring garment that you can actually commission from Hong Kong is probably like a slightly more structured, a little edgier, a little boxier fit as well. I was probably more drawn to something that's a bit softer, something that's more not tying up the lip, and like probably something just relaxed. Yeah, because I don't work in corporate. I don't have to wear like very formal things, and I think I wear them because I like them. And I think there's also, it was trendy at that time. I think 2015, 2020, like pre-COVID especially. I think that was a time when like softer tailoring really was like taking over the world. You know, obviously me being influenced by that culture, I would think that, you know, I think that's probably the thing I would like to go for. But sadly, I don't think there were a lot of options in Hong Kong. And I think when people did offer you that option, it was more like a mimicry. Like it was more like a replica. And it didn't feel very genuine to me. And I was kind of, I think it was gutted. Yeah. And I think, I wouldn't say it was pessimistic, but I think I wasn't entirely happy about that. Until I found a place which I was actually recommended by a friend. So I went up there, saw a very tiny studio. I wouldn't say it was run down, but it was like a very simple setup.
Was this in Hong Kong?
Yeah, it was in Hong Kong for a while. So that was actually my partner who was like running his previous business. Like my partner worked in finance. His name is Andy. He worked in finance, and then he went into tailoring and started his own 3D tailoring startup.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it was more of a startup project, whereas, you know, when we talk about the Anthology today, it wasn't quite a startup. It's more like something that we're very passionate about. It's a passion project. It's something that would take it so seriously, but it's definitely not a startup that you would imagine in like the tech world or in like the finance world. Back then, what Andy was doing was really focused on like the tech part. So it was bespoke tailoring combined with 3D scanning, a project that I think a lot of investors would probably be very into. So he successfully got a patent, which was very successful of him. But unfortunately, at that time, I believe there was another company that was actually based in Belgium that was doing the exact same model, acquired by LVMH. So Andy was like,
that's crazy.
You know, you have a bottomless pit of like, you know, support. So it would be really hard to compete against them, as you said. So yeah, that was part of the story. I found it really interesting. I found the work very nice as well, as compared to like other tailors and other places. I got really interested. I was like, oh, you know, I think maybe I can actually make a garment here. But we started talking. I think I've gone beyond the customer. I think I've kind of gone down the road where we were starting to talk about like, you know, how can we actually make the business better? Or, you know, how can we actually pull a little bit of connections here and there? Because since I had prior experience in the UK, maybe we could actually bring in a little bit of like, you know, fabric connections or, you know, trimmings or, you know, any of these like connections back to Hong Kong. So we did a little bit of that, a little bit of research, a lot more research, days and nights. I remember we like spent late nights in that old studio for a bit
Yeah.
until the day we've actually like set up an array of collections where we're like, oh, you know, maybe this is a good cut, maybe this
Yeah.
is a very interesting silhouette for a brand. And I think the idea of running a new brand lingered in the back of my mind, and I thought maybe we start something new and give it a whole revamp, things would actually go a lot more interesting. It would go a little more international. And because we have a set of ideas right now, whereas back then it was only good craft.
Yeah.
And that's it. But right now, maybe we have a combination of good craft with interesting designs.
Yeah.
Or maybe like interesting branding as well. So I think that was a time when we're like, okay, great. Why don't we start something together? Yeah, we're very lucky as well. There was a little bit of a shift in terms of, you know, our craftsmen and in terms of like our work at the atelier. Andy and I were very lucky to have the opportunity to set up our own atelier in China as well. So I think in 2018, that's when the Anthology officially started.
Wow.
Yeah.
How many years was that? Like from just starting, like just you like meeting him and like getting to know like the process and to really having your first collection?
I think I have to look back at a calendar, but I think first met Andy when I was like 17.
Oh wow.
If I'm not mistaken. So I think it's like 8-9 years counting. Yeah, it's been a while. I mean, the brand's been running for 5 years now. Fingers crossed. And you know, touch wood. Nothing bad's been happening at the moment, but we never know. 5 years in the journey. Obviously there was a little bit of prep work beforehand. So I think we've basically been like, we just cracked on. Probably like ever since the first week we met. So yeah, it's been a while.
Wow, okay. I feel like in this story, there's so much with like right timing, like the right people, because I feel like a lot of times like in like, you know, when you hear about like, oh, something's like not working out, it's a lot of those like key moments that just don't work. So I feel like this is so meant to happen for you.
I think serendipity is definitely a big part of it. Yeah, I think without my team and without my partner, essentially, I don't think we have gone this far.
Yeah.
I think a very young person starting business at the age of like, you know, 19, 20, I think it was daunting for sure, because I don't think there are a lot of nuances that I would never understand, or I don't understand by far. I think it will take a lot more time for me to pick up on.
What do you think was your biggest struggle actually? Like the biggest challenges that you had to overcome to be where you are right now?
First of all, I've gone nowhere. Second, I think there are challenges because, you know, first, I think mentality-wise, there was certain parts of me was definitely very immature. And you would definitely make a lot of mistakes because you would make a lot of mistakes based on sentiments. You think that is the right decision to go for, but, you know, maybe objectively that's not. So that's one. Skill set wise, obviously, because if you only live for 20 years, there's so much more that you can actually learn from other people or other things, or even books or whatever. And I would say third, really, because especially in a trade that's probably full of like toxic men, potentially. I think in a society where age probably dictates a lot of things as well. Like you would feel there are certain insecurities or, you know, inferiority that you may think like, you know, oh, because I'm not old enough, you know, how would people see me? I think, yes, to an extent, some things could be internalized. Like just because you don't talk about it doesn't mean that you don't know it.
Yeah.
You know that, you know, some people might be talking behind your back, some people might be talking about things. There were speculations that were made as well. So yeah, I think that's probably it.
How do you overcome it, like eventually?
You don't. You simply don't. I think what
maybe not the word overcome, like how do you cope with it and like move on and like continue doing what you do, like because I actually right before this I had a conversation with like a girl that I used to go to school with, and she's a lot younger, and I think like she's also going through a similar thing as in, you know, like just started a business, like going quite well at the beginning stage, and then people are like talking and like making speculations, and I think like this happens to honestly like everyone who are like doing well, and people will talk, and I think it's something that we all need to learn to how to like cope and like overcome, and eventually like not let it affect us. So like in your journey, like how do you do that?
I think I'm one of those lucky ones, if I have to be very honest with you. Like having a partner who doesn't judge, that means a lot. I would give full credits to my partner Andy for being so understanding, for not being egoistic about things. Essentially just being a very good listener all the time. You know, when I'm in trouble, he would listen. When I have something to share, he would listen. So I think it's definitely the connection between the team and I, and, you know, obviously them having a lot of faith in what I'm doing and believing in my vision as well. So that is very lucky of me.
Yeah. I think essentially just like surrounding yourself with the right people.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
I think having like positive influence is definitely a very important part of it.
Yeah. And like just now you talked about, like making like a mark, and especially I think like in this industry it's quite saturated. Like you have to like not I think it's for like fashion, for someone who doesn't know that much about like the specifics in fashion, like
Right.
oh it feels like there's a lot of like options, like I really need to like get into it and to learn about the brand in order to know what they're doing, right?
Right.
So how do you like stand out? How do you do that initial standout to tell people that you're actually doing something different?
Well, I think with what the Anthology is doing, the crux of it, or like crucially, it's predominantly a craft business, which is something that already says a lot about it. Like, prior to the marketing bit of it, as a craft label, to reach a certain level of craft, that is lots of training, that is a lot of hard work behind it, which I think in the modern fashion world, it's probably only couture house that can actually reach the same amount, the same level. Whereas when you actually or when you actually compare to like, a modern fast fashion brand or like an FMCG or like something that's very fast driven, you don't normally have that sort of delivery. So just by craft itself already differentiates and distinguishes itself from a lot of things. And that's already says a lot. And I think what's on top of that is probably the icing on the cake. It's how you make this seem appealing to people. And I think, every house or every couture house, every fashion house, or even every tailoring house would hopefully have their own sensibility and style or their own narrative. And I think we've just found our narrative because it's potentially like driven by someone who's a little younger, which have a slightly fresher take on it. Yeah. So I think that's what it is. And I think when people say like, oh, you guys are branding your market's okay, like your product's okay, or you guys seem to be doing quite all right, I would say it's a craft that speaks for itself. And I think that's the bigger part.
That's amazing though. I think that's something a lot of people nowadays sometimes like overlook, like the craft itself essentially. Like because I talk to a lot of people who like they like the first thing that they will come up with is like the marketing plan and like the branding. Yeah.
Well, I'm actually hopeful. Like I think seeing that way, I actually do see the other side of the coin. I think there are a lot of youngsters these days. They are actually quite into craft.
Yeah.
Because I think, obviously a lot of people are actually living in smaller flats. Things are actually getting a lot more competitive out there. There's so many options out there. I think people actually do pay a little more attention to details.
Yeah.
I think there are, like, to a certain level, when people care about the things that they put on, craft actually does come into play. Or even like furniture or like interiors. I think there are a lot more people. Like when for example, like a cafe in like central London or, a cafe in Hong Kong, apart from like, them serving good coffee, which is already craft, one, you also look at like, how they design the store as well. The layouts and, whether the seats are comfortable, whether the layouts actually feels cozy to you. I think that's also another part of it.
Yeah.
So I think craft is always woven in the bone. Like it's the integral part of a business.
Yeah.
Or at least for a lot of business.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And now that so you just mentioned like the two different locations that you kind of like live in, because I've been wondering for a really long time, like, so because you don't have a store here in London.
No, not at the moment.
But you live here.
I spend the majority of the time in London, yes.
And your stores are in Hong Kong and Taipei.
Correct.
How does that work? Like, I'm just so curious that like, like logistically and like, how does it work?
I think I'm the lucky one because I get to have the perks of being inspired in a foreign place. And I can get to do things that I believe in to enrich the brand or, the team. So in my role, what I get to do is like, I get to meet people. I need to design my things. I need to put together like, things I wouldn't want to put out on our platform, be it in our stores or website. So it is quintessentially a creative job. And by that, it also means that, you have to go to museums, you have to see things, you have to go to galleries, you can like attend different events to really think about it, what's the feature of the brand. So that allows me to be here for a while. And whilst I'm designing offshore for the team, we draft our patterns, I go on calls with them every morning. Obviously the time difference is something that we have to beat. It's something that we have to overcome. But I think thankfully this is not New York versus Hong Kong. So 8 hours or 7 hours, it's still bearable. And I believe a lot of people are actually living off a different time zone, whilst they're actually running their own venture as well. So I
Yeah.
think, like many other people out there, I'm just doing the same things as they are.
Yeah, I really like this because I feel like, like post-COVID style of working, especially that people are more looking into like working remotely and
Right.
like not having the team at one place.
Mm.
And even like this week that I've been in London, like a lot of people are like, oh, like I'm actually based in like two places, like they go like back and forth because they do want to like get that inspiration. I think it's nice to kind of like be aware that this is a possibility because I know that there are also people who are still like considering and like wondering like oh, if this is like feasible basically.
I think it could be, as long as you can manage your team and manage your time. Again, it's all about like how you actually monitor, or how you conduct or manage like good morals, like, or guidelines for yourself, like be it for your team or for yourself. Not everyone has to be like a business owner to actually work abroad, and I think I would equally be happy working under someone's umbrella and still be abroad if the company allows me to. I think it's all about looking for the options, right? But yeah, I think it's a very interesting journey.
Yeah.
But having said that, I actually don't find Hong Kong any less inspirational. It just offers me like a different perspective.
Yes.
I'm just lending a lens of London, and see how things are here. And when you can always like culminate it within Hong Kong. I think Hong Kong, I do find it very intriguing in the sense that I think it's very high octane food and it's so energetic. Like when we talk about like how London never sleeps, I think I mean London does sleep actually. Stores are closed. Stores are closed at like 5 or 6 on Sundays, so that's
there's still
very
like traffic
depressing.
like 2 a.m.
Yes, I mean Hong Kong does as well.
Yeah.
And I think Hong Kong gives a very different energy. But I think there are also certain aspects I do find London a little more interesting at the moment, and that's why I've decided to be here for a short while.
And going a little bit deeper into this, because obviously, like I know, like you're from Hong Kong, and like your family is based there, like just being, because I know something that as entrepreneurs that we struggle with is like family pressure, and at least for me, because I'm also like flying like all the time, and I don't get to spend enough time with like family and friends, and there's obviously like pressure like around that area. So like thoughts,
Well,
thoughts and feels.
What I struggle with the most is probably family and time. Family, because I'm abroad, I'm away. I would have thought my life spent being abroad would probably end by the time when I finished my education. But it got extended for a little more because I made the decision that I wanted to be here for a while or anywhere else but Hong Kong in the meantime. And I think that's probably one thing that I probably struggle a lot because, I have family, like especially my mom. I think she tends to be a little clingy. She likes to spend time with me, which, it's totally understandable. But I think there are perhaps small sacrifices, if not huge, that one would have to make before, they think, oh, maybe business is stable enough, or, I think it's probably the right time to go back to Asia, or, I think there are a lot of first, second generation, like Americans, or, like Asian Americans or like BBCs abroad, they would also think that, one day maybe we'll actually return to Hong Kong, or, we'll return to China. I think it's just a matter of time. It could be, it doesn't have to be. Yeah, I think I'm constantly exploring my options because I think taking a slightly more artistic pillar of the company, I think I still want to explore the options and keep my options open.
Yeah. Would you say it's like basically prioritizing things in like the different stages in life?
Maybe in my formative years, yes. Yeah. I think maybe a little bit like prioritizing. Like for now, I think this is like, the thing that I want to do.
Yeah.
And maybe when I've actually reached like another stepping stone, maybe I'll rethink like, oh, maybe this is a time when I can actually like sit back a little. Maybe it's time to like go home and like spend more time with family. I think circumstances do change, right? I think it really depends. I can't give you a very perfect answer for now.
Are you the type who do you like plan ahead like 3 years, 5 years, like where you want to be, or are you just like
I've been asked this question actually quite often these
Really?
days. Yes, I have, surprisingly. I plan. I think I have a goal. I have a destination stating where I want to be in probably a good 3, 5, or 8 years' time. I don't think I look into the very specific details because I do know that, things are changing on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
It's really hard to take control of how you want it to be exact. But you always have that sort of imaginary situation of, where you would ideally want to be situated, and that's something that I think about. And I think so far, like, you reach some, you don't accomplish some, but I think it's okay. You have to be forgiving to yourself as well. Yeah.
I think the reason why I'm asking this is because as like creative people, there's a stereotype around that, oh, you know, like artists are so like free spirited and like everywhere, and they just like go on with their feelings. I think that's like the stereotype that a lot of people have with like creative people. So
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I never really thought about that.
because I think even for myself, like being as a creative, I feel that sometimes,
Okay.
that because I don't know for you, like with like when you were designing like your collections, but for me sometimes like the moments that I work best in is when I'm like in a mood, like that does happen. And I think that's why people have the stereotype of
Well,
people like
after a bit of use of alcohol, I suppose. Yeah. Well, not for me, unfortunately. I'm quite allergic to alcohol, which is which
Okay.
takes away a big chunk of my inspiration, perhaps. Like if I was actually like, if I had the chance to like consume a lot more, maybe that would actually, I would be a changed person. But I did not have that privilege, so yeah.
Yeah, because I've talked to like even like on the podcast, I've talked to like songwriters, and I remember in one episode, she talks about how she works like the best at like 2 a.m. to like 5 a.m. and sometimes she just like she really wants to sleep, but she just has like ideas for her songs, like she just needs to work, and
Right.
I think that's sometimes a little bit like like for my understanding, I feel like that can be difficult with like people around you to like accommodate to like that type of like schedule and like lifestyle. Like, do you feel this, or are you more like you have like a set schedule and then you just like do things like in a more structured way?
I think I'm grateful again to an extent because I've been in a relationship for a very long time, and I think, well, we don't say partner in Asia, we say girlfriends, right, or you know, wives. So my girlfriend and I, we've been together for a very long time, and I think she was one of the people who really motivated me to start this. So she has been tremendously understanding, I think. So I don't think she interferes a lot. And if anything, she gives me the full creative space to explore the things I want to. So you're right about it. I do find myself a little more creative at times between like 12 to 5 a.m. It happens. It happens, especially after having dinners with like, you know, a bunch of good friends. And then you go home and you're like, I don't feel like sleeping yet. Maybe I should actually go back to work a little. I'm glad that I have the flexibility. So yes, I think I find myself being a little more inspired or being a little more productive at weird times. And that changes around all the time. It's ever changing.
Yeah.
It's hardly predictable as well, which is probably the challenging part of it. But I think as a creator or as a business runner as well, I think what's important is that you actually set out guidelines for yourself.
Yeah.
You know, you give yourself like targets that you have to meet, and you have to think about like, you know, even if you're not feeling particularly creative that day, maybe you can actually still accomplish like, you know, ABC, which is like, you know, the task that actually requires little less creativity, like requires a little less brain power, but maybe there are like admin things that you have to like look into. Maybe there's like communications that you actually have to like get done with colleagues or, you know, like other counterparts. I think I just try to like swap things around all the time just to make sure that, you know, hopefully I can optimize what I'm good at that very moment.
Yeah. No, I feel this 100%. Like, this is actually something that I've been like trying to improve in the past few weeks. Like,
Hey, you got a whole podcast set up. Hey, that is very well accomplished.
oh, thank you. On talk about accomplishments, I do have to like ask this, like, because a lot of people that I know, when like mentioning like Anthology, they think about like the celebrity wearing your clothes to like the Oscars.
Yes, that was Mr. Bill Nye was actually in Harry Potter, and apparently we just found out the other day. Yeah, I was actually watching Harry Potter and I realized he was in there. He was also in Pirates of the Caribbean, the guy with tentacles.
Oh my gosh! Okay.
Very good movies. About time he was a dad, and then he was in some very almost awful movies. Pikachu, which is we don't talk about it here, but.
I do love Pikachu.
I don't mind Pikachu the anime, but I don't know, real life movie? I don't know, I might pass.
But yes, like how was it? Because I think like ever since like you posted it or something, like people definitely took more interest in knowing about your brand.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
How do you feel about that? I feel like that's as if like overnight fame, or like, how would you think about this?
Gratitude. 100%.
I love
Like,
that.
once again, it's always gratitude. And I think in my life, there's a lot of fortunate circumstances that I've been able to meet the right people at the right time. So again, back to that. It wasn't planned. And I think if you really wanted to know, like, how, or, like, you know, what we've done, frankly speaking, we're not a company that has huge budgets for marketing. We're not that kind of company because we spend almost every penny into refining craft and making good product for people. And that's the brand value, and that's our core value. Meeting Bill Nighy was just me being lucky on New Bond Street one day. Like, it was a friendly encounter, really.
Wait, sorry, you met him on the street?
I met him on the street, yeah. As if we were strangers, basically, yeah. That was it.
Wait, and what happened?
So long story short, I always love to talk about this because there are two stores that I love so dearly. One is Miu Miu and one is Hermes. So on a Sunday afternoon, I was window shopping, or shopping, I can't remember. I was with my girlfriend. We saw Bill from afar. He was crossing a road. I was still window shopping. I saw him. Didn't pay attention, didn't pay heed to it because he's a celebrity. It's a Sunday afternoon. He's having his own downtime. Why bother? Like, it's not like we would have any sort of, like, you know, meaningful conversations, right? I was wearing a tailoring garment. He walked past, he swept past us, looked back, and he was like, interesting. And I think my girlfriend probably noticed that he was looking at me, and she was telling me, like, oh, you know, that guy, you know, that actor was looking at you. I was like, oh, really interesting. But obviously I won't, you know, interfere. So he came up to me, and all of a sudden he was like, I really love what you're wearing. And I was like, oh, thank you. And I looked at the suit. I was like, that's a Savile made suit. Slightly more structured, slightly more old English. And I obviously returned a favor. I was like, oh, you know, I returned a compliment. That was a very nice suit as well. And we started chatting a little bit about tailoring. And I think he kind of got a sense that I probably knew about my tailoring a little bit. And he just asked for my phone. And he was like, can I have you? He asked me for my phone and he typed in his number. He was like, let's talk about suit another day. And I was like, okay, that's very interesting. And I was thinking, like, you know, that's probably like not a real number or anything, right? I texted him just to say thank you for his compliments. And he was like, okay, let's meet up for coffee then. So we ended up meeting up for coffee. And I told him about what we were doing. And I think he was really interested in it. And I think it was very eye-opening to him, a quintessential old English gentleman who has always been wearing like English tailored garments. To him, wearing like an Asian crafted tailoring piece was probably unheard of. So I think he just wanted to give it a try. And I think ever since then, he has become a very good private client of ours. And it was only, it caught me by surprise that he actually like voiced out to like some of the media, you know, he was wearing our garments as well. So I was really grateful about it.
Yeah. As just a listener listening to the story, how I feel is that, because I know you mentioned like you being lucky like a few times in this pod, and I don't think that's what's happening. Obviously there needs to be like timing and opportunities and circumstances, but I think how I feel behind all of this is that you're so prepared for these opportunities. Like,
You felt too kind, thank you.
no, 100%, because I think opportunities happen to a lot of people, whether you notice it or not. And a lot of people, they don't notice, or they're not in the right space at that time to receive the opportunity. So I think, like, obviously you like having your brand and like knowing and like always dressing well, like after all the times that I've met you, like, and that moment happened and it was like meant to be for you.
I would agree with you. Yes, I think we always prepared. I think we don't expect jackpots to happen.
Yeah.
That is not how we envision our business to grow. Like that is not the way for our business to grow. But if the chances do come by and we're prepared, thankfully we've been so far, we were able to grasp that.
Yeah.
And I think, yes, I would agree, yeah.
Yeah. So do you have any advice or tips for people, you know, like looking to be in this industry, looking to like create something more creative? Like, is there anything that you would wish to tell yourself?
My old self.
Yeah.
Be less shy. Yeah. Frankly, yeah. When I compare with very extroverted people, I think that's a big con. I don't think I'm outgoing enough. And I don't think I'm courageous enough to actually be the one to initiate things. And I think there would equally be a lot of missed opportunities. It's a double-edged sword because for some people, they don't like to be approached and they would
rather be the person who approaches you if they appreciate what you're doing. But at the same time, I feel like you were saying, you know, how one has to be well prepared at times. And I think sometimes reaching out could also be part of the prep work, which is something that perhaps I'm not so good at. So yeah, if it's something that I have to tell myself to do better, perhaps it's me taking the initiative instead.
Okay.
Maybe not in that particular occasion, but maybe something else.
Okay. Okay, I love that. Well, we're almost at the end of our podcast, and
Oh, that's so soon.
yeah, I know.
Okay.
It's actually already been like 45 minutes.
Oh wow, okay, well, we're done pretty
Yeah.
okay.
And for the last question, I asked everyone, you can take
Hmm.
some time to think about this if you like. I want you to think about and share one thing that you love about yourself to the audience.
I would say honesty and patience, actually. Yeah, I think what we're doing or what we're believing in, it's, at the end of the day, it's a very honest trade. Like, craft, it's something that you can't lie about. If it's good craft, it's good. If it's not, it does show. So, honesty is a very big part of what I've been doing with my team and my partner for the longest time. And I think patience is one thing that I believe that I would have, and I hope I still have in the future. I think we're willing to nurture. We're very willing to, you know, just take part in this process and really wait out and see how things go the next step. Because I think running, some people will call it like a fashion business. Some people will call it like, you know, a clothing business, like whatever you call it. I think these things take time. I think because we're already in the ocean, they're full of very, very successful ships that are doing so well in the fashion and art space. Like, the world generally doesn't need another mediocre brand. So to be able to make this a cultural phenomenon, or to be able to actually make this a recognizable label, I think it takes time. And I'm happy to wait, because whilst we're waiting, we're also enriching ourselves as well. We're taking in different experiences. We're learning from different, like, you know, learning from the past mistakes, and we're refining our ideas day by day as well. And we're constantly adapting to changes as well. So I think it's a very important part of it. And I think it's something that I don't think any time would make it better or worse.
I love that so much because I don't have patience at all.
Oh, okay.
And I think it's such a good, honestly, like it's so great to have, because things do take time, and the time in between is always lessons, like it's always something that you learn. And wow.
Again, I think it's a double-edged sword, right? Yeah. It's like me being an introvert versus an extrovert. It's the same thing. So you get some, you win some, you lose some.
Yeah.
I'm sure you have your very, very good attributes as well.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Well, we're at the end of today's pod. Is there anything you want to add before we wrap up?
No, I think I'm very good. And I
Okay.
think we've covered more or less everything.
I think so too, yeah.
Thank you for your time, Leanne.
Thank you. And
Thank you.
do you want to share with the audience like where they can find you, like your Instagram handle and everything?
Sure. Well, we've got the Anthology, which is based in Hong Kong. We have another Taiwan store as well in Taipei, which our showroom has just, you know, got relocated, and now it's bigger and grander. So if you guys are in Hong Kong and Taipei, do stop by. Otherwise, you guys can always visit theanthology.net, which is our little online store, and probably a website that's full of interesting inspirations for you guys. I hope you guys enjoy it.
Okay, amazing. And I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you later then.